You know what's worse than finding out your family hates you? Finding out they've been planning your destruction for years. Quietly, patiently, while smiling at you across the Thanksgiving table. This is the story of Marcus, and how a $73 million inheritance turned his own blood into his worst enemies. Marcus grew up knowing he was different, not in some mystical, chosen one kind of way. No, nothing that glamorous. He was different because he was the accident, the oops baby, the one who showed up 15 years after his parents thought they were done having kids. His two older brothers, Vincent and Derek, were already in college when Marcus was learning to walk. They had their own lives, their own trajectories, their own relationship with their father, Richard Thornton, a man who built a pharmaceutical empire from nothing. $73 million. That's what Richard Thornton was worth when the doctors told him the cancer was terminal. And that's when everything changed. See, Marcus had always been the outsider. Family dinners felt like business meetings he wasn't invited to. His brothers spoke in code, references to deals, to properties, to the plan. And whenever Marcus walked into the room, the conversation would shift. Smoothly, seamlessly, like they'd rehearsed it. He told himself it was paranoia.
He told himself that 15-year age gaps just create natural distance. He told himself a lot of things. But deep down, he knew. The first sign that something was seriously wrong came 3 months before his father died. Marcus was 26, working as an architect in Seattle. He'd built his own life, far from the family's East Coast empire. He visited when he could, called when he remembered, sent birthday cards that probably went straight into the trash. Then his father called him, personally. Not through the assistant, not through his brothers, Richard Thornton himself. "I need you to come home," his father said. His voice was thin, paper-thin, like it might tear if he spoke too loud. "There's something I need to tell you. Just you." Just him? In 26 years, Marcus couldn't remember a single conversation with his father that didn't include at least one of his brothers. Not one. He booked the next flight. The mansion hadn't changed. Georgian columns, circular driveway, hedges trimmed with surgical precision. But it felt different somehow. Quieter. Like the house itself was holding its breath. His father was in the study. Oxygen tank beside him, monitors beeping softly, nurse stationed outside the door. The man who once commanded boardrooms and crushed competitors now weighed maybe 130 pounds. "Sit down," Richard said. Not a request. Marcus sat. For a long moment, his father just looked at him. Really looked. Like he was trying to memorize his face, or maybe seeing him clearly for the first time. "I made mistakes with you," Richard finally said. "I was 60 when you were born. I didn't have the energy I had with your brothers. I let them raise themselves around you. And they raised themselves wrong." Marcus felt his throat tighten. "Dad, what are you—" "Listen." The old man's hand trembled as he reached for a folder on his desk. "Just listen. I don't have time for questions." He slid the folder across. Inside were documents, legal documents, and a letter, handwritten, dated 3 weeks ago. "I'm leaving you controlling interest in the company," Richard said. 51%. Your brothers will split the rest." The room tilted. Marcus actually gripped the armrest to steady himself. "I know what you're thinking," his father continued. "Why? Why you? You've never worked a day in pharmaceuticals. You don't know the business. You don't even like us very much." He wasn't wrong. "Because you're the only one I trust not to destroy it." Richard's eyes were hard now, sharp despite the weakness in his body. "Your brothers.
They have plans, Marcus. Plans I don't approve of. Plans that would gut this company, sell it off piece by piece, and hurt a lot of people in the process. What kind of plans? The kind that prioritize profit over patience. The kind that would make us the villains in every news story for the next decade. He coughed, wet and rattling. I built something that helps people. I won't let them turn it into a machine that exploits them. Marcus looked at the documents. Controlling interest, 51%. The power to overrule his brothers on any decision. They were going to hate him. They already hate you, Richard said, as if reading his mind. The difference is, now you'll have the power to survive it. Richard Thornton died 19 days later. The funeral was elegant, understated. The kind of tasteful grief that costs about $40,000 and looks great in obituary photos. Marcus stood between his brothers at the graveside. Vincent, the eldest, kept his hand on Marcus's shoulder the entire time. A gesture that looked supportive. It wasn't. It was a reminder. We know. We know what you're getting, and we're going to do something about it. The will reading happened 2 days later, in the same study where Richard had changed everything. Same desk, same leather chairs, different energy entirely. The lawyer was nervous. Marcus could tell by the way he kept adjusting his glasses, the way his eyes darted toward Vincent every few sentences. When he got to the part about controlling interest, the room went cold. Not metaphorically. Marcus actually felt the temperature drop. Or maybe that was just the blood draining from his brothers' faces. This is ridiculous, Vincent said. His voice was calm, controlled, but his hands were white-knuckled on the armrests. Marcus has no experience. He's never even set foot in the corporate office. The will is ironclad, the lawyer said quietly. Mr. Thornton made sure of that. Derek, the middle brother, hadn't said a word. He just stared at Marcus. And there was something in that stare that made Marcus want to run. Not anger, no, something worse. Calculation. The first attack came exactly 11 days after the funeral. Marcus was in a meeting, his first board meeting as majority shareholder, when security burst through the doors. Police behind them, handcuffs out. Marcus Thornton, you're under arrest for embezzlement and fraud. The room erupted. Board members shouting, lawyers scrambling, someone calling someone. Marcus just stood there, hands being wrenched behind his back, watching his brothers across the table. Vincent was already on his phone, looking concerned, playing the role of the shocked sibling perfectly. But Derek? Derek smiled. Just for a second. Just long enough for Marcus to see it. Then it was gone, replaced by manufactured worry. The charges were elaborate, beautifully constructed actually. Someone had created a paper trail showing Marcus siphoning $3.2 million from a company subsidiary into offshore accounts in his name, with his digital signature. There was just one problem. $3.2 million. That's a lot of money to most people. But Marcus was an architect. He made good money, sure, but he wasn't wealthy. He drove a Honda. His apartment had IKEA furniture. He'd never even been to the Cayman Islands, let alone opened a bank account there. His lawyer, a woman named Patricia Chen, laid it out for him in the cold fluorescent light of the county jail. Someone did this to you, she said. Someone with access to corporate systems, someone who knows how to forge digital signatures, someone who had months to plan this. My brothers. Probably. She leaned back. But proving it? That's going to be hard. They covered their tracks well. Marcus thought about Derek's smile, about Vincent's hand on his shoulder at the funeral. They've been planning this since before he died, Marcus realized. Maybe since he first got sick. They knew what was in the will. How would they know? Because my father wasn't as careful as he thought he was. He had the same assistant for 30 years, and that assistant is married to Vincent's college roommate. Patricia's eyes widened. Yeah. Marcus felt something cold settle in his chest. That's my family. He spent 4 days in jail before making bail. 4 days of concrete and fluorescent lights and the constant gnawing fear that this was just the beginning. He was right. While he was locked up, his brothers moved, fast. They called an emergency board meeting, argued that Marcus's criminal charges made him unfit to exercise his controlling interest, demanded a temporary transfer of his voting rights. To them. The board, terrified of scandal, agreed. When Marcus got out, he found himself majority owner of a company he could no longer control. His brothers had frozen his assets, challenged the validity of the will, and launched a PR campaign painting him as a troubled young man who'd always been jealous of his successful siblings. 3 weeks. That's all it took to destroy his life. But here's the thing about being the youngest, about being the outsider, about being underestimated your whole life. You learn to watch, to wait, to see things others miss. And Marcus had been watching his brothers for 26 years.
The turning point came from an unexpected source. Remember that nurse? The one stationed outside his father's study during their last conversation? Her name was Elena. She'd worked for Richard Thornton for 7 years, and she reached out to Marcus 3 weeks into his legal nightmare. "Your father recorded it," she said. They were meeting in a coffee shop far from the family's usual territory. Her hands shook around her cup. "The conversation you had with him, about your brothers, about why he was leaving you control." Marcus went very still. "What?" "He was paranoid at the end, recorded everything. I don't know if it was the medication or just intuition. But he told me something. Told me that if anything happened to you after he was gone, I should find you. Tell you to look in the lake house, bottom drawer of the desk in the bedroom. False bottom. Why didn't you come forward sooner?" Elena's eyes filled with tears. "Because your brother Vincent called me the day after the funeral. He said if I talked to anyone about anything I'd seen or heard, he'd make sure I never worked as a nurse again. That he'd destroy me." She took a shaky breath. "But I can't watch them do this. Your father was a good man. He deserved better than sons like them." The lake house was a 4-hour drive. Marcus went at night, told no one, parked half a mile away and walked the rest. The desk was exactly where Elena described. The false bottom took him 20 minutes to find. His father had always been meticulous. But when it finally clicked open, a hard drive, a folder of documents, and a letter. "Marcus, if you're reading this, I'm dead, and your brothers have made their move. I hoped this wouldn't be necessary. I hoped somehow that they might accept my decision. But I know them. I raised them. I created them. On this drive, you'll find recordings of conversations I've had with Vincent and Derek over the past 2 years. Conversations where they discuss their plans for the company after I'm gone. Illegal plans. Plans involving price fixing, bribery of FDA officials, and the suppression of safety data on 3 of our most profitable medications. I gathered this evidence slowly, carefully. They never suspected. I also made copies of documents proving that Derek has already embezzled over $12 million from company accounts. Money that was never reported, never investigated, because he covered his tracks well. Or so he thought. Use this carefully, son. Your brothers are dangerous. They've had decades to learn how to be cruel, but they never learned that true power isn't about taking. It's about protecting. Protect what I built.
Protect the people who depend on it. And protect yourself.
I'm sorry I wasn't a better father, but maybe this can be my last gift. Dad. Marcus spent 3 days going through everything. The recordings were damning. Vincent discussing bribes to FDA officials, Derek laughing about how they'd handle any board members who opposed them. Both of them calm and casual, planning to raise prices on a cancer medication by 400% because they'll pay anything to stay alive. These were his brothers, his blood. And they talked about dying patients like they were line items on a spreadsheet. The documents were worse. Derek's embezzlement wasn't 3.2 million, it was 12.7 million. Spread across years, hidden in shell companies, laundered through real estate purchases. The same framework they'd used to frame Marcus. They didn't even bother to create a new scheme. They just copied Derek's playbook and put Marcus's name on it. Here's where most people would go to the FBI. Hand over everything. Let justice take its course. But Marcus had learned something from his father. Something Richard Thornton had lived by his entire career. Control the narrative, or it controls you. He didn't go to the FBI. Not yet. He went to the press. Specifically, he went to a journalist named Sarah Chen, no relation to his lawyer, who had been investigating the pharmaceutical industry for years, who had written exposés that brought down executives twice as powerful as the Thornton brothers, who had a reputation for being utterly, terrifyingly thorough. He gave her everything, the recordings, the documents, the timeline of how his brothers had framed him using Derek's own embezzlement scheme. And then he waited. The story broke on a Tuesday. Front page of the New York Times. Lead story on every major network. Trending #1 on Twitter within an hour. Thornton heirs caught on tape. Bribery, fraud, and the frame-up of their own brother. Marcus watched from his lawyer's office as his brother's world collapsed in real time. Vincent's statement, hastily written, claimed the recordings were fabricated. Derek went dark completely, his phone off, his accounts silent, his house surrounded by reporters. The FBI moved within 48 hours. Arrests were made. Assets frozen. The real kind this time, not the fake freeze they'd put on Marcus. The charges against Marcus? Dropped. Completely. The digital forensics team found proof that the forged documents had been created on Derek's personal computer. He hadn't even been smart enough to use a burner. The trial lasted 8 months. Marcus testified. Elena testified. Board members who'd been too scared to speak up before found their courage when federal prosecutors came calling. Vincent got 14 years. Derek got 18. Their lawyers tried everything. Appeals, motions, character witnesses from their fancy prep schools. But the recordings were impossible to deny. Their own voices, their own words, their own cruelty, preserved forever. And Marcus? Marcus took his seat as controlling shareholder. Not because he wanted power, not because he wanted revenge, but because his father was right. Some things need protecting. He lowered the price on that cancer medication, implemented profit sharing for employees, funded a whistleblower protection program that became a model for the industry. The company's profits dropped by 15% the first year, and somehow the stock price went up. Turns out investors like companies that aren't run by criminals. There's one more thing. A year after the trial ended, Marcus got a letter
From Vincent, from prison. He almost didn't open it, almost threw it straight in the trash. But something, curiosity, or maybe some last thread of family connection, made him tear the envelope. Marcus, you won. I hope you're happy. But know this, I don't regret what we did. I regret that we failed. Father was weak.
He built an empire and then wanted to give it to someone who would make it smaller, make it less. You'll never understand what Derek and I could have done with that company, the power we could have had, the legacy we could have built. You think you're the hero of this story, but you're just the accident who got lucky. We should have handled you years ago. That's my only regret. Your brother, Vincent. Marcus read it twice. Then he folded it carefully, put it back in the envelope, and filed it away. Not because he cared what Vincent thought, but because he wanted to remember. To remember what family can become when love is replaced by greed, when connection is replaced by calculation, when blood means nothing and power means everything. He keeps that letter in the bottom drawer of his desk. Not hidden, just there. A reminder. Some people are born into families. Others survive them. 3 years later, Marcus is still running the company, still making decisions that would make his brothers furious, still getting thank you letters from patients whose medications now cost what they should have cost all along. He never visits Vincent or Derek, never takes their calls, never acknowledges their existence except when legally required. But every year, on his father's birthday, he drives to the cemetery alone. He doesn't say much, doesn't need to. Just sits there, by the headstone, and thinks about the man who saw his sons clearly, even the ones he barely knew. I'm trying, Dad, he says sometimes. I'm trying to protect it. And somewhere, he hopes, someone is listening.